We got two blockbuster sessions coming up. We've had a great day already. I know everyone is excited for the two sessions we've got going on. I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to hand you over to Greg Baxter to walk through the 2023 Enterprise After Fire report. Greg, all yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. My name is Greg Baxter. I'm a senior researcher with FP Innovations, and nothing to do with age. It's just that I've been around that company for so long that they finally have to move you up. I'll be presenting the After Fire report from Enterprise. Three people went up there, collected data, and what we collected in the report form is what I'll be presenting here. I'm going to be going through lessons learned for Enterprise, but not just Enterprise, but for three other fires that our company has done case studies on, including some initial findings from Los Angeles, which you'll see that they all sort of tend to tie together. And then future work. Our company just got a 4-year funding for post-fire data collection, and I will be talking to people in this room because we're looking for people to help on that. And so I'll be going through that at the end. Just a presentation outline. I'm going to go through the background, sort of where our whole project started, the methods that we used in Enterprise. We looked at fire behavior, we looked at fuel treatments, we used the home assessment app to collect data, and we also used the structural fire investigator, which was the first time that's taken place in Canada. Historically, when wildfires move into communities, the insurance companies say, well, the wildfire caused it, and so it's written off as that. There's no real data collection of actually how each individual structure ignited. And so that's where we wanted this person to work on, find where it ignited on the structure, the materials, and then how it progressed through the structure. So that was new. The learnings, I'm gonna go through Enterprise, Shuswap, West Kelowna, Jasper, and then Los Angeles. And then the future, the Wildfire Community Impact Research. It's the new 4-year funding I'm talking about. I'll go through the objectives. We need your help. And the big thing will be quick access to communities. We had problems with that earlier in a few of the places in BC. And then the human resources. We need people to help, collect the data. So a bit of the background. Back in 2021, BC FireSmart approached us and said they'd like us to collect data when a wildfire impacts a community. They wanted that data collected before the fire arrived, during the fire, and following the fire as it went through, to go back in and look at the post-fire. So we put together a quick framework with that. We got put on the ICS chart. The problem was we were tied in with a structure protection specialist. Whenever they were dispatched, we were dispatched with them. They did a fantastic job. We had 2 of the busiest years in BC, back to back. We went out 6 times. We got 0 data just because the structure protection people were so good. So we had to go back and sort of come up with a new plan, how we can collect data. And then we started looking around. CAL FIRE, they are fantastic at post-fire data collection. Australia is very good at post-fire data collection. Those 2 agencies or regions in the world, they get a lot of fire, and they've done this for 40 years. And so we figured, okay, we'll sort of see what they do, and we'll apply the same thing. So I put together a framework in the spring of 2023, and then the fire season happened, and everyone knows about what kind of a fire season it happened. It started early, it started in places it shouldn't have. Northern Vancouver Island in April, which should be under 3 feet of water, had a fire. Fires down east. We had fires in Northwest Territories the fall before and early in the spring, and it sort of, the whole country was involved, and record levels of hectares were burnt. And amongst those record level numbers of hectares, a lot of communities were impacted, and that's where we got sent out. So the objectives of the work, and this was all put together by FireSmart BC, the BCWS, and our company. We wanted to identify how a fire moved into a community. We weren't worried about where it started, the tactics used to fight it. We just wanted to know what the fire was doing when it moved into the community, and then how it moved through the community. We wanted to compare damaged and undamaged structures. We wanted to determine the impact that structure protection efforts had within the community and on individual structures. Unfortunately, the amount of data we collected there was minimal. Every fire we went to, everyone said it happened so fast. I mean, there was a few places where structure protection was getting ready and had to leave. And that was in all 4 of the case studies that we did. It's something that we really want to look at in the future and how to do that and collect data on that better. And then we wanted to identify a fuel treatment's modified fire behavior. And we had a number of examples in Enterprise and down in West Kelowna as well there. So fire behavior. We wanted to collect data. Like I said, we wanted to know what the fire was doing when it came into the community. So what did we do? We collected the physical evidence. You can see the way the trees are leaning, you know, the freeze on the branches. You can tell how the fire was moving. You can tell, you know, by how high the bowl is burnt. And also which side is higher. You can know what way the fire was moving. So we collected all that physical evidence on the ground. We used fire weather data. There's a lot of it out there. For Enterprise, we were lucky that they had put a weather station right in the middle of the highway there that collected data right through the fire, so we had that to work on and use that data to run fire behavior models. We collected fuels data, personal observations. We got a number of personal observations from Enterprise, but when we did our West Kelowna case study, everyone on the other side of the lake was snapping pictures and had video. We could put that fire, you know, second by second by second where it was and how it moved, which was really good. We had to get a repository set up, another private company to run that people could download their video and their pictures, and that worked really well. And then we could go through those to put together fire behavior. Personal observations, talking to people. Everyone had a story. Timelines might be a little off in moments of an emergency like that. They know what happened. It's just putting the timeline to it was really challenging. We used fire behavior models and satellite images as the picture there shows. For fuel treatments, and this is specific to Enterprise, we looked at a number of different things. Thinning, they had thinned the west side. In the black spruce tree species, they had a number of aspen stands, which acted as fuel breaks. Clearings, just areas that have been cleared. Those are fuel treatments. And then baseball diamonds, anything like that that's open, we looked at as a fuel treatment because it really impacted, you know, the fire behavior and fire spread. Now for the structures, we use the FireSmart Wildfire Mitigation App. That's the new name for it. And you've got the immediate zone poster over there. So what this is, it has 7 different sections. You go through and you answer all these questions. Is it FireSmart? Isn't it? Cedar shakes would be, no, it's not FireSmart. So you take that off. You know, if it had metal roof, yes, FireSmart, put a yes. And so that's what we did. And there were 68 different questions. And so we went through, looked at the damaged and the undamaged structures, ticking these boxes off, and then we basically just summed them. And then you could sort of see patterns that came out of that data. Started 30 meters out from the structure, like fuel treatments. It also included questions on that, right to the house itself. Structural fire inspection, it says here, but the investigation used NFPA 921 methodology, which is a legal court-approved methodology for fire inspection. And went to every structure, worked with the fire behavior specialist to know which way the fire was coming in. You could sort of pinpoint where the fires and the embers were landing, and then go to those spots and sort of see the patterns that was there, the materials that were there, and the fire spread patterns. A lot had to be gained from collapse patterns. You can tell where the fire started basically from the way the structure collapsed, and that was done a number of times just because in a lot of the things we looked at, there was very, very little left other than that kind of stuff. But we've got reports on every structure we looked at. And so when we approached the structures, we randomly picked one structure, one damaged structure, and then we tried to collect data from the closest undamaged structures, sort of to pair them because they're sort of in the same areas, the same kind of fuels, and go that way. So the results, fire behavior, drought conditions, everyone here has mentioned that already. I think that the fall before there was a fire in October in the territories, and they started up right early in the spring, and the conditions didn't get any better. So there was drought conditions. The spread direction of the fire into the town was 305 degrees northwest. Wind speed, and this is collected from that weather station in the middle of the highway, gusts to 91 kilometers an hour with wind speeds of 35 kilometers an hour. Models predicted 43 meters per minute rate of spread. So in C2 black spruce, very, very fast. The bottom is just the FFMC, DMC, and the FWI. You can see a 66.9 on the day the fire moved into town. Very extremely high. So this is just a quick graph The black line is when the fire approximately moved into town. You can see the wind gusts were peaking, the wind speeds were peaking, the temperatures were peaking, and this was in the evening, and the RH was extremely low. So you had all of that combination as the fire is moving in. Results for the fuel treatment. We looked at 4 different ones: the ball diamond, the stand thinning on the west side, and the black spruce. The fuel removal, the area was dozed, fuel was removed, and the research plots we looked at also as a fuel treatment. It was just because of the checkered pattern breaking up the continuity of the forest. The thinning on the side there is 1,400 stems per hectare and 800 stems per hectare in the 2 places we looked at. And we ran an experiment down in Pelican Mountain, which is just by northeast of Slave Lake in Alberta, in the same fuel type a number of years ago. And that we found, we ran it from a control into a thinned area. And the fire really didn't change speed. And that was because the surface fuels weren't treated. All the shrubs and everything and all the regen were left on site. And so that fire just, the flames were lower, but it went through just as fast, which makes just as much of a problem. And those, which we looked at there, the stands were denser than these ones. So these ones were quite thin, but it had the surface fuels in there, and that just carries the fire through. The other thing we looked at with the fuel treatments is this corridors of structure survival. This is the data we looked at. And the black lines there, you can see, that's just that's the angle the wind's coming at, where the fuel break is, and structures that either survived or didn't. The green structures survived, the red didn't. And so you can see there's that one black spruce thing right here, and all the structures are red. The fire just raced through that black spruce, spotted into there, and continued on. And then you've got the aspen stand down there by the community hall, and those right in the same line, there more buildings survived. And same at the bottom, all the green, there was some structure protection in that area, but also that area was dozed around it. And so that reduced the fuels. And so those sort of little corridors showed up here, and that just stood out to us when we looked at the data. So the structure fire investigation findings, this is the damaged one on top, coniferous trees close to the structure. Fires in the coniferous trees and moves to the structures. Wood foundations was the key one for Enterprise. And then yard debris. Debris within 10 meters of the structure ignites. There's enough heat there to move to the structure itself. And that we found in the Shuswap, in West Kelowna, and in Enterprise. For the undamaged thing, suppression was key on the structures where there was some suppression activities going on. Deciduous vegetation, and that's an example of that aspen stand. Downwind of that, the structures were more likely to survive. And then fuel breaks, the baseball diamond, all of that combined with aspen stands is a good fuel treatment. So with the wildfire mitigation app, we put both on the same figure here. Untreated conifers, 7 of the 7 houses we looked at had untreated conifers right next to them. And that's, you got fuel that close, it passes it on. Whereas in the undamaged house, there's only 1 that had untreated conifers there. Trees, and that's all types of trees, not just conifers, but unmanaged trees, just vegetation within 30 meters right up to the structure. 1.5 meter combustibles, and this is a key one. This is anything within 1.5 meters of the side of the structure. Anything that can burn usually ignites from the embers up the sides, into the soffits, and then into the roof. And that was probably the #1 thing we saw when we combined the data from all the case studies we've done. Live dead material around the structure, deck materials. Punky wood on a deck or other combustible materials on a deck led to the structure burning. We saw a number of places in West Kelowna. If a crew could get there, if a structure protection crew could get there and do nothing else, they would throw materials off the deck, and that saved a number of structures. Same thing, because those things would ignite and burn up the siding into the roof. And the base of the wall. This was mentioned in the previous thing. I saw a slide in the base of the wall, at 15 centimeters, at the base of the wall on the outside of the house on non-flammable material. And yard items, again, another key thing. So the learnings, environmental, these are the things that we can control. No flammable fuels within 1.5 meters of a structure. This is critical. And I'll get into this a little later. But if this is the one thing that can be taken away to increase the probability of a structure surviving, is get rid of the materials right next to the structure, anything that can burn. Vegetation management within 10 meters of the structure, and that's coniferous trees. It's a lot of cedars down in the Okanagan, right next to the structure. It's the worst thing you can have there. Space and prune the coniferous trees out to 30 meters. We saw some really good examples of where the trees were spaced and limbed, that the fire didn't progress through there with the intensity to get to the structure. And then fuel removal and species conversion along the edge. And this includes green space, grass, and aspen trees instead of coniferous. For the structural side, enterprise skirting needs to be made of fire-resistant material and no defects such as holes. There was a number of cases where, they had the skirting, it was punky, there was holes, embers go through that, and then the structure burns from below. And we saw that a number of times. It's very similar to sea cans. Sea cans burn from below. They're elevated off the ground about this much. Embers go underneath. It's wood flooring in a sea can and burns up on the inside. We saw a number of examples of that down in BC. Same idea. The bottom 15 centimeters of the base of the wall should be clear of fuel and constructed of fire-resistant materials. Deck material should be fire-resistant, and excess flammable debris within 10 meters of a structure should be reduced or managed. And that's vehicles, ATVs, anything that can ignite that close to the structure should be removed. So this is just a table of recommendations, and the way we broke this down is responsibility. Who could look after this? And you see, we've got homeowners and residents, and construct decks from fire-resistant materials. They can do that. Establish a 1.5 meter zone around structures that is free of all combustible fuels. Homeowners, this is the one thing they can do that really would improve the probability of their structure surviving. But we've also got government level for different things. Local, territorial, federal, or private business. Who could be involved in that? And so that's the way we wrote that table down. So I'm just going to go through some examples here. The learnings, and this is from other case studies. Embers are the primary ignition agent, not the wall of fire. We did 117 structure assessments in all the case studies we did in 2023. There was one example of the fire actually moving up to the structure and igniting it. All the rest were embers coming, landing, finding the weakness, and igniting the structure. We've got two examples here. That one picture, 2 kilometers. You got a perfect picture there of one structure burning. And the closest the fire was 2 kilometers. And behind a hill, there's a hill there that you can't see either. So the embers were going 2 kilometers. This satellite image, you can see the embers crossing the lake and starting fires on the other side. And that's 2.5 kilometers minimum. And, people there, the fire people, working West Kelowna and Kelowna had never seen embers cross that lake before. But we're starting to see a lot of things that we've never seen before. And so, that's what we're all trying to work on, reducing that, the impacts of that. Structural, this is just a few examples. The home ignition zone, 0 to 1.5 meters. We have a bush there, structural protection, put that out. If it hadn't, the soffits are right there. That would have gone up in there. Soffits melt at 600 degrees, which is easily achieved here. They fall off, and the embers have a free path into the roof. And once it's in the roof, it spreads easily. The picture on the right there is cedars. This is from the West Kelowna. I wanted to call the West Kelowna report cedars and soffits because that was the #1 thing down there. The soffits right beside the tree, up into the soffits and through the structure that way. But these were 10 meters from a structure. The house didn't burn. All the windows were cracked though on that side, just from the heat alone from that. 10 meters away, the windows were cracked. And the bottom picture is just a picture of, if you remove those soffits, then you can see where your embers can get into and burn. Structure to structure, that was in Jasper. There are other places we looked at, the structures weren't close. In Jasper, there was a number of streets where the structures were very close together. You could have one structure igniting. There was an example that our crews looked at. One structure had cedar shingles. That ignited, and then that spread and got, with the winds they had, spread to the other structures. And so all you need is one weak spot, and fire can get in and continue to spread. So that's structure to structure occurred there. We had one example in West Kelowna, and the structures were 1.5 meters apart and went from one to the next, to the next, to the next, and got 5 in a row. Vegetation management works. The green grass, fantastic, if it's right up to the structure. But it's got to stay green. This picture is from West Kelowna where it's very, very dry in the summer. And so to keep your water green in a water-stressed environment is tough to begin with. So that's just an example of how it works, but there are issues with that. And the Okanagan Water Board has come up to me after some presentations and pointed that out. So I thought I should mention that. The other one is fuel reduction and spacing. This person in this picture actually raked all the needles on the ground. And you can see in the pictures, the fire scars on the trees were all quite low. So the fire did go through there, but it was very low intensity. And it's because all the fuel was moved and the trees were spaced. Sprinklers work. What happened to that picture? Is that purple to you guys too? Oh. Well, this is a great picture. I don't know what happened here. And this is either, through the homeowners or structure protection, the picture that you can't really see very well is a house that for all intents and purposes was fire dumb. It should not have survived, but the homeowner put 6 of these small little sprinkler heads on his place. He had a gravity, giant tank up the hill, gravity fed to these things. 4 gallons an hour is what these sprinkler heads put out. And that saved his structure. He was on a slope, he had fuels right up there, he had old wooden decks, but just the mist from these sprinkler heads saved that building. And I've got one of these, and we're going to get some made, and we're going to be testing them in Fort Providence. We're doing some sprinkler research down there. We want to test these things. I think it'd be fantastic. I'm sorry this picture didn't work because you could really see how this house is situated, and it's very, very lucky. So other case studies. This is the findings contributing to structure ignition. Case study number 1, combustible fuel, 0 to 1.5 meters. That was the key thing of what we found that's separated damaged and undamaged structures. Enterprise, combustible fuel, 0 to 1.5 meters, fuel treatments and skirting. Jasper, cedar shingles, combustible fuel, 0 to 1.5 meter zone, and structure to structure ignition. LA came out with a very quick report. And I actually met the head of CAL FIRE operations last week, and she said they did 29,000 structure assessments within the first week. And that was my question to her. How do you do that? Because it took us, months to do it. But we were learning. They've got crews and unlimited money to do things. And so that's what they did. So, but they found in this initial report, combustible fuel 0 to 1.5 meters from the structure. Structure to structure, because you got those neighborhoods that are built right side by side, and then building materials. We weren't able in our work to get a good understanding of building materials, which is too bad. I mean, that's something we're going to be looking at in the future, but most of the structures that we looked at were completely gone. And so you might have had, really good fire resistant materials on the side, but the fire got in another way and took the building down. And we have a really good example of that from the work we did in Enterprise. We had 3 structures side by side. We had a cedar, we had fire dumb, we had current day materials, and then we had a fire smart structure. The fire dumb one ignited, spread to the middle one. The fire smart one had hardy board. And we got the video and all of this information. It did everything it could to survive. But the fire eventually came across through the soffits into the roof and then burnt from inside. And so we want to continue on that side and thing, and we've done some work in the labs, but you know, just in the case studies we've done, we've had a really tough time finding information on that. The Americans have done a bit more. So this is the future work that we're looking at. This is the wildfire community impact research. It's national in scope. We got federal funding for 4 years. The objective is post-fire documentation across cities, rural areas, First Nations, everything. We want to collect data wherever the fire impacts the community. We want to go and collect data. We want to train data collectors to compile a roster, and that's the thing. We're looking for, you know, people who run fire smart home assessments could assist us in this, or fire inspections, or fire investigators also can do this. We want quick access. We need to get into places quickly. I mean, we did Enterprise when snow was coming down. It was actually 4 of the coldest days I saw all winter because I live in Penticton, but it was cold. We need to get in places faster to see the evidence that is there. I know in Jasper, while we were still working, they were bulldozing places, and so you lose all the data that way. And like I say, we're looking for assistance. The key thing here is we want to standardize things. We want to standardize the methodology. If we can send this methodology out to any agency, and if we've got people on a roster, they can go out and complete this. Data management will be key. We want to compile it, you know, put a database together that can be analyzed, and that's the key thing, that the data can be pulled out, we can look at it and start to find patterns. We want an accessible database for people with passwords. They can get in there and, you know, contribute data that they find. And we want a repository, like I said, which we did for West Kelowna, so people can upload their videos and their pictures, because that was incredibly helpful to us. Letters are being sent out probably in the next week, and we're sending these letters out to wildfire impacted communities, Indigenous communities, governments, local to territorial to provincial, and fire management agencies. We want everyone in the country to get this letter, to have an understanding what we're doing. And then later this spring, probably early summer, we're gonna have sort of online meetings where people can contact us and find out exactly what we're doing. But you know, the letters we're sending out is a step-by-step what we want, what we're looking for, and sort of gaining interest that way. And if that works, you know, then we might get to a few fires sooner. How you can help: early access. You know, if you get these letters, we want to be able to get in quick. Integration of our research group into incident command teams. Access to data and exchange of important information. Those are the key ones. So, questions? How's that for time?
That is beautiful for time. We got about 90 seconds if we're lucky. What I'm going to do is, if I can get Rodney to come up, and we'll just get the sort of the switch over going in the background here, while, Greg, I'm just going to pause you there for a second. I could probably squeeze one question in here if there is someone who just wants to quickly get a question in before we do the switch over. I got a hand coming up at the back. We're going to make it super quick. And then we'll do the switch. Greg is going to be able to hang on just a little bit here after the last session. He's got a flight to catch afterwards, but you will have a chance to maybe ask him questions.
Just one quick question in regards to fire behavior, fire fuel types. In Enterprise, was matted grass a consideration? I know there's a lot of matted grass to the west of there, even though there is big winds. And in Fort McMurray, the biggest carrier was juniper, where there was no trees that burnt down structures. I realized we had a lot of black spruce around Enterprise, but there was also a lot of juniper. What were the considerations of those two fuel types?
Yeah, well, we didn't, is this on? Yeah, we didn't look at Fort McMurray. We've read the reports, and so I can't really speak on that. But Enterprise, our fire behavior specialists went through and collected all the fuels right on the edge of town, is what we were looking at, right, sort of the fire, when it came across the train tracks there, is we were looking at those fuels. And so there was mostly black spruce, matted grass. Yeah, it's key in carrying fire. And juniper. Yeah, juniper was a key thing in a number of places, but we didn't notice it in Enterprise. Okay.
Okay.
But it sure was in West Kelowna. It was a key thing, very key.
Let's have a huge round of applause. That was a super impressive half hour. Packed a lot in. Thank you.